Our scripture reading today comes from Ezekiel 36, verses 26 through 27. A new heart I will give you, a new spirit I will put within you, and I will remove from your body the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and make you follow my statutes and be careful to observe my ordinances.
Una lectura de los profetas. Les daré un nuevo corazón y derramaré un espíritu nuevo entre ustedes. Quitaré ese corazón de piedra que ahora tienen y les pondré un corazón de carne. Infundiré mi espíritu en ustedes y haré que sigan mis estatutos y obedezcan mis leyes. You read this? Can you read?
The word of God for the people of God.
La palabra de Dios para el pueblo de Dios.
Good morning, and thank you for being with us. Our speaker this morning is an amazing woman who spoke to us at Adult Education a few months ago. It was earlier in the spring, I think it was, when we were discussing this service and trying to decide who could speak with us. She was one of the first people that we thought of. This is Pat Rivera, and I will sit down because she has much that we need to hear.
Muy buenos días a todos. Qué linda está la mañana en que vengo a saludarte. Venimos todos con gusto y placer a felicitarte. Nacieron todas las flores en la pila del bautismo cantaron los reyes señores y a quien amaneciendo ya la luz del día nos dio. There is a beautiful saying, dicho in Spanish, when you sing, you pray 2 times. Las Mañanitas is a beautiful traditional song in our culture that's sung primarily at birthdays, anniversaries, really all wonderful occasions. And there's a very big connection in our culture in the music, the song, to Mother Nature, to the spirit or higher power of your understanding. There's always that connection that's beautifully expressed in song. So let's see what this song is saying. How beautiful is this morning in which I come to greet you. And it's a pleasure to be here. And it really is a pleasure to be here. And I come to congratulate you. And I congratulate you for coming with an open mind and heart to try to glean what I'm about to share with you and hopefully gain some appreciation on your part. So, on the day that you were born, all the flowers were born and the birds were singing. I left a symbol on the altar today of a little bird with a cascarón in it, and I'll tell you about that later. On the day that I was born, yes, all the flowers were born, the birds were singing, and I came into this world with an essence, with a cultural heritage essence. And in that essence, and at the core of my heritage, is a language, the word. Yes, the word really was their beginning. And because the word is so important and so connected to the language, I want us to, as I share things, kind of envision this umbrella as to the importance of the word related to culture. Because you see, the word is so powerful. It carries within it the history, the traditions, the culture, the value systems, the philosophy. That's how powerful the word is. And so let me share a little bit of my history. I'm afraid to trip. A little bit of my history. My ancestors, my ancestors, the Vigiles, actually established with 4 other families a community up north called Los Güeros, the blonde ones. So when I think of my ancestors establishing a community, can you imagine many moons ago what it would be like? Working the land, dealing with animals, all of the influences of the seasons. It must have been very challenging. My grandfather Vigil down the road actually donated a piece of land for a morada, which still stands in Los Güeros, a morada. My grandfather was a penitente, as were many of my relatives and conocidos. The morada in Los Güeros still stands, but as time has gone, all of the penitentes of that community are also gone. And with them really goes a lot. My grandmother Vigil was a curandera, and she was a partera, a woman of healing, and a midwife. So much so that the influence that she gave, I had one of my children at home with a midwife. And I think to myself, what must it have been for a woman in those days to be so connected to Mother Earth as to be able to create plant medicine and help the community in their healing process? What must it have been to travel long distances? You remember years ago, it wasn't house after house after house. Long distances to go and assist a fellow woman delivering and bringing a new child into this world. It must have been an awesome experience. And while I treasure those memories and that which my grandmother passed on, I think the greatest thing that she did for me was she passed on the word, the language. And she would tell us when we would go visit her, she'd say, if you want to talk to me, speak in Spanish or don't speak to me. And we used to think, oh my God, she's so strict, and she was. But what she did for us was a great gift. We are bilingual. And my children, my husband and I made it a definite point and goal in our lives to share and to teach them their tradition, and most especially their language. They are bilingual because they, that new generation, have to be the ones to pass it on, have to be the role models to our youth that, hey, this language is important. Do not erase it from your lives. Be proud of it because it carries within it everything that I told you. So when I was thinking about what would I share with you as far as traditions, there were so many, but I decided to choose 2 that might be a little bit familiar with you. And the first one is Christmas. During the Christmas season, we celebrate Las Posadas. Las Posadas is the journey of Mary and Joseph seeking shelter. And I'm a member of the Sociedad Folclórica. I wore my escudo today. The Sociedad Folclórica's mission is to preserve culture and tradition in this area. So in Las Posadas, it's a 9-day novena, and what you'll see is a group of women, a group of people, hello, a group of people singing in song and prayer, asking for posadas. You'll see another group inside saying no. But because it's a novena, on the 9th day of the posadas, the song changes. In prayer, in song, we say, open the doors, come in. Yes, there is room in the inn. And after on that last day, there's usually pageantry. So we'll see some children. I noticed you involve your children here. You'll see some children dressed as angels, as shepherds, as wise men, Mary and Joseph. And that night there'll be a lot more singing in Spanish of the traditional songs and a lot more praying. But the praying is very intentional, for the intention of our loved ones that aren't well, for the intention of the world. Whatever it is, it's very intentional prayer. And after that, of course, we have to celebrate. And we go to a home, somebody will host us, and there'll be typical food. So you'll see pozole, it's called a pozolada, pozole, beans, chili, red and green chili, tortillas, calabacitas. For postre, you'll see pastelitos, capirotada, bizcochitos, and natillas. So it's community building, and it's also celebrating with food, another core of the culture. So let's fast forward now to the Easter season. During the Easter season, the Quaresma, the 40 days leading up to Easter, in our tradition is a very solemn time. It's a prayerful time, personal reflection leading up to the resurrection. And during the Quaresma, there'll be a lack of eating meat. That's not a good word, but we won't be eating very much meat. The influence of the church, of course. So for sure, on Ash Wednesday, the Fridays, particularly Good Friday, no meat was eaten. And so people ate eggs a lot. And the eggs were made into something called a cascarón. So you take the egg and you make a little hole on the top, another one on the bottom, remove the contents to use however you're going to prepare your dish. You clean and wash the eggshell and let it dry, put it to the side for an activity I'll tell you about later. And during Holy Week of the Quaresma, out here, let's go out here to the ranch. Back at the ranch, the penitentes have very private and very intense ceremonies. We're not invited to all of them, but we were privileged that in our community they invited us to some of the ceremonies. And Holy Thursday was one of them. So on Holy Thursday evening, we were invited, up to the generation of my children, we were invited to a service called Los Tinieblas. And that's when you invite the spirit of your loved ones into the area. And some people dramatize it, and they like to think of it that way. But I never did. I always thought, isn't it wonderful? All of our spirits are truly connected, whether on that side or this side. And that message carried me when I had to say goodbye to people that I truly loved in this world. So those are the Tinieblas. On Good Friday, the penitentes, of course, have very private and intense ceremonies. But many times they would invite us after, and there we would have something called the encuentro. And that would be where the Carmelitas, a female religious group, and remember, at the farm, it's not like here, house and house and house. It's like that farm, and here's the morada out here. So they would come in prayer and singing with statuary. The penitentes would be here singing alabados with other members of the community, and we would encounter the encuentro. We would counter each other. And after that prayer service, we would be invited to somebody's home, where a typical Lenten meal is going to be beans, red chili, but without meat, and this time with something called torta de huevo, little egg patties, and very delicious. Calabacitas, and because there's no meat, we always had like salmon loaves or salmon patties, and of course tortillas. The postre, the dessert, would be something called panocha, and probably capirotada, and maybe pastelitos. Now, let's come over here to Santa Fe on Good Friday. Growing up in Santa Fe when I was young, Santa Fe was very quiet during the 3 hours. No businesses were open. People were in churches praying during those 3 hours. After the 3 hours, again, people would go visit churches, go make a little visit to all the churches. And I remember my mom always used to take us to the Carmelite Chapel to say a prayer. And, of course, we're going to share a Lenten meal, the same meal I told you. The beans, the chili without meat with torta de huevo, calabacitas, salmon patties, salmon loaf, or over here, panocha and capirotada, and maybe pastelitos. But the nice thing about that is you shared it. So those that couldn't make a Lenten meal, you shared the food with them. And this was always interesting to me because I remember my mother taking a casserole, let's just say of calabacitas, over to the neighbor, and pretty soon she'd bring us a casserole dish of beans. And even though everybody was preparing the same meal, they shared and they took, to each other. Again, very community building, right? Acknowledging and honoring neighbors. That was really important. So these were things. On Saturday, y'all probably still color eggs, and that's very traditional. But for us, it was taking those cascaras, the eggshell, and now turning it into a cascarón, a decorated eggshell. And those decorated eggshells, what we did, and I have a sample on the altar, you would take confetti and you put it into the hole, seal the holes with a little bit of tissue, and then decorate them. And you might paint them, you might, design whatever. And what do you use these for? Well, after Easter Sunday, the Saturday, usually after Easter Sunday, we have something called a baile de cascarones, a dance of the eggshells. And in that dance, we bring the cascarones. If you want to dance with somebody, you crack the eggshell over their head. So, I don't know, no one says this, but I guess a person that has the most confetti is probably the belle of the ball. And no, you don't crack on the head, you crack over the head. So in this dance, everybody dances with everyone. The music is going to be traditional Spanish colonial music, and the dances are going to be dances like La Cuna, La Varsoviana, La Marcha, Baile de los Paños, Baile de los Compadres. And it's usually with fiddle and guitar, the musicians. So I want to tell you just a little bit about the Baile de los Compadres. Again, think of our tradition as very community building. It's almost like I'm a teacher by profession, and it's always like, breaking the beginning of your classroom, and you're having icebreakers. So for this dance, Baile de los Compadres, what the women are given an apron, the men are given a tie, and you match the pattern on your apron to the tie to the apron. And that person is a person you're going to dance that dance with, and it's called your compadre. And there's a saying that when you have and dance with your compadre, you are compadres for the whole year. Again, community building. And I still have compadres that I know that we invite each other to different activities. And it's very precious. But the one that sticks out in my memory the most was one year, one of the Sociedad Folclorica's daughters came. I'm thinking she must have been maybe 8 or 10. And my husband was her compadre. They were dancing, and she loved to crack the cascarones over his head. But what it did, because you're a compadre for the whole year, she would call him up and she'd say, "Compadre, can you tutor me in with my math? Can you help me with my science homework? You see, my husband was a scientist and a mathematician. So that connection really carried her on through college. So that connection is important. So in celebration, in traditions, it's very communal. And so I do want to share that while I was happy and I was honored that Mary asked me to come again, that I have to say that even though there's so many more things I could share with you, it's important to keep our culture alive. And we keep it alive by not shame-basing people for speaking their language, particularly our youth, particularly in the schools. They need to have an appreciation and an acknowledgement of that language. And as such, that we love the culture, we can't allow it to be erased, not by exploitation, profiteering, inequities, patronizing, or modern colonization. Such as one example I could give you that still is painful to me as I drive by and see the old archives building. Some of my friends and relatives were the artists of that mural that no longer exists. And it no longer exists because of the power of a very giant dollar sign, erasure. So our essence, holding that language intact and time, will shape the perceptions of our own identity. I, for one, I don't want to feel myself at history's mercy brought about by erasure. Because if culture is erased and not preserved, and that fire of just being so proud of that, then all we've become is a community of a population center. I'd hate to see that happen in my Santa Fe that I grew up with. So with all the dedication in my heart of preserving the culture, with all the gratitude that I have that I was born into this world with the heritage of my culture, I'll say the last words of the song that I began with. Wake up, the sun's light of the day is here. So let's see what's dawning. And I invite you to see what's dawning. And maybe it's maybe the reading this morning was just meant to be a new spirit, a new spirit. Let's see what's dawning. Gracias, and thank you for inviting me this morning.